they see me, they know that every day when I'm breathing, it's for us to go farther. You know, every time I speak, I want the truth to come out. You know what I'm saying? Every time I speak, I want to shiver. You know, I don't want them to be like, they know what I'm going to say because it's polite. They know what I'm going to say. And even if I get in trouble, you know what I'm saying? Ain't that what we're supposed to do? I'm not saying I'm going to rule the world or I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee that I will spark the brain that will change the world. And that's our job, is to spark somebody else watching us. We might not be the ones, but let's not be selfish, and because we're not going to change the world, let's not talk about how we should change it. I don't know how to change it, but I know if I keep talking about how dirty it is out here, somebody going to clean it up.
And now he's been promoted. His job, principal.
What's going on, everyone? This is Uche Njoku, and welcome to the Sneaker Principal podcast. Wow. Day 2. The last time I did this 2 days in a row, I can't even tell you when, but I'm so happy to be here this evening, and those of you who are joining me right now, thank you so much. It's very encouraging because I'm really devoting myself to spending time in this space and really building up this podcast. So those of you who were following me before in the past and were like, what happened? I kind of explained it yesterday, but today I'm going full head on with a topic that is something that is going to kind of like have me telling on myself. And let me change the camera angle real quick. So I'm going to tell on myself real quick because those of you who followed me in the past know my educational background, and you know that I am an educator. I am a high school principal here in New York City. My undergraduate degree is in film and media studies. So yes, I am a movie buff. Probably not the way I used to be, but I still will get obsessed and veg out on films, documentaries. But before I came upstairs to record this podcast, I was watching a documentary on Amazon Prime. Amazon Video, called Subnormal. And I think this is going to be the topic of one of the upcoming topics for my podcast. It's about what happened in the 60s and 70s to Afro-Caribbean children that moved to London, and how they were thrown into special schools. And it just gives me a lot of hints and feelings of what I went through here in America when I first came here in the early 80s, and then also what I still see happening for a lot of children who are coming from the Caribbean and from Africa, and even worse yet, coming from inner cities here in America. And there are an overwhelming number of children who are thrown into special education because all of a sudden they have trouble learning. But that's a whole nother conversation. But this evening, first of all, I want to say what's up. Before I even start, I want to say what's up to those of you on TikTok who are watching me right now. I appreciate y'all. This is something I'm trying to do here where before when I was doing my podcast, I'll pump into Clubhouse. But I'm like, you know what? I got to bless and show love to the TikTok family because I posted one video like a little bit over a year ago, and from that point it just kind of like my audience kept on growing on TikTok, and now I have over 123,000 subscribers, followers. So I want to thank you guys for that. So I figure I should just pump this content to a space where I have people who are loving what I'm doing. So with that being said, thank you so much for those of you who are watching on TikTok. But those of you who are listening on the podcast, this is going to be on Apple Podcasts and all the other podcast streaming platforms, and also on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, Twitch, and one more place, on Twitter. So this is going out to all the different platforms. And like I said yesterday, it doesn't really matter if it's one person listening or 100 people listening. I believe that at some point in time, somebody who needs to hear this is going to connect to it. So with that being said, thank you so much again. And I just want to quickly say subscribe. Please do me the honor of subscribing if you're on YouTube, especially, because this is going to help the algorithm really push this content out and build this channel. Let's go ahead and jump into the meat of this evening. So like I was saying earlier, I'm one of those people who get stuck on shows on either it's on Netflix or it's on Apple Plus or it's on Amazon, and I just can't stop watching. So I'll commit an hour or two, sometimes more, over the course of any break that I have or weekend watching content. I'm a multitasker, so I'm usually doing something else while I'm doing that. But the one extended series that really caught my attention was Inventing Anna. And right now, I get, I know I'm late to the game talking about this because everyone's talking about it. I think as of yesterday, it was the #1 show on Netflix. And then I just completed watching it, I think, the day before yesterday. But then yesterday I watched the Tinder Swindler. I'd seen it and I just ignored it. I don't know why. I just saw Tinder and I was like, I don't care. But then I saw a preview, a trailer, and I was like, yo, another scammer. So I was like, I gotta watch this. So and after watching both of them, first of all, it's very, very entertaining, very, very interesting, because it makes you think about the human psychology and exactly the things that draw us into spaces that we end up regretting. So, for example, this guy, the Tinder Swindler, Simon Leviev, who, built women. The highest number that I saw was about $10 million, but definitely in the millions of dollars in money for women he dated to sponsor his lifestyle, where he treated other women. And he did this across Europe, across the world. Then you have Anna Delvey, Anna Sorokin, aka Anna Delvey, who was this young 20-something-year-old in her early 20s, 24, 25, something like that, who came to New York City and immersed herself into the limelight of New York City, New York City's elites, and convinced them that she was a German heiress, and not only that, not only convinced them, but to the point where a woman who had $0 was able to navigate her way through, the elite of New York City and to all the top parties, all the top events, and whatever the case, and convince people that she was the daughter of this billionaire, and for that reason, they just opened doors for her everywhere. And after everything was said, the number that was put to the damages she did in New York City was $250,000, so $250,000. But the craziest part about it, she had this idea. And again, spoiler alert, if you're watching this, it's because you've already seen these two spaces. And I'm not even gonna do spoiler alert. I'm just letting you know, if you saw this topic for this podcast, the educating of Simon Leviev and Anna Delvey, is because you already saw it and you want to hear my opinion on this interesting take that I'm taking this evening. So she damn near came close, very close, according to the film, and to getting $40 million in bank loans to fund this idea she had for this art club, social space, whatever you want to call it. And but the whole thing for me was very interesting. I know people, social media looked it up, were just kind of like, oh my God, she, these people are scammers and they did all these different things. There's people out there who are like, good for them, saying that the women that were scammed by Simon deserved it because they were thirsty. But then there are people out there who are saying like, Anna, because those millionaires or whoever she deceived deserved it, but they're wealthy and it didn't hurt anyone who in need. But those are all interesting spaces. For me as an educator, for me as someone who's devoted a good chunk of my adult life to what happens within the school building, I just asked myself, what environment produced an Anna Delvey or a Simon Lviv? Like, what is it that happened? Not necessarily in their households, because for all intents and purposes, what we saw in the film, Inventing Anna, and then also the documentary, the Tinder Swindler, they seem to come from somewhat normal, everyday, salt of the earth type families. So what I'm talking about here is they come from spaces where they're at least from looking through your window, through the TV screen into their space, at least how the story is being told, they seem to be coming from normal spaces. Like, both families, both their parents, or I think in the documentary they kind of show Simon's mother, and she seemed genuinely like disappointed in her son. Like, you got the vibe of that was kind of like, this is not how we raised them. And then from the film, you got the sense, at least the way the story was told, the exact same thing coming from Anna Delvey or Sorokin's family. The same thing, a sense of disappointment. And then there's that incredible monologue from the woman who plays her mother in the film, where she talks about her connection to her son, and how she felt that they were the same, from the same cut from the same cloth, same blood. But then Anna just always felt different and separate. But the thing that's very interesting is the portion of Inventing Anna that looks into, that explores her years in school. Because the way the film is framed, it kind of gives the impression that what happened to her happened from an experience from school, the turning point, her being a new immigrant girl, Russian immigrant to Germany. And of course, they kind of talked about the prejudice that immigrants, even white immigrants, Russians in white Europe, in Germany, experience. And they talked about things like being dirty and being poor and being, scoundrels. And then here she is going to the school, and they kind of show this scene in her in school, I think like the first day or whatever the case may be, and the kids laugh at her. They look at her and they mock her. And then it kind of like triggers this evolution where she moves towards becoming this character, this person that wanted to be better than everybody else. So you see her kind of evolve, the way she dressed and the way she moved and everything else, and then she kind of becomes kind of a bully, calling other girls out for what they wore and what they had. And again, she was not coming from a rich family, and at best a lower middle class family. And then there's a scene where they're trying to explore where, in the documentary about Simon Lviv, the Tinder Swindler, where they're trying to figure out like where he was from, and they go to Israel, I believe Tel Aviv, and they make it a point to show where they're going from this like spacious cityscape and down to the back streets of the city, to these narrower streets, to this kind of like a poor community. And in that space, you are introduced to where this young man who is living an incredible life, traveling around the world and partying and blowing $20,000 in 3 days and all kinds of stuff, where he starts from. It's just very humble beginnings. And okay, and I say all this because I can relate to those spaces. I don't know about you, but I can relate to that. Who listening right now grew up in less than desirable spaces. I'm not talking about like, going to poor is a bad thing, but depending where you're from in the world, and I would say majority of the world, there's this connotation that poverty is like a sickness. Like, poverty is something that you have to fight to get out of. And then, but what's interesting about saying poverty is something that you need to get out of is that poverty itself is looked upon as something that that is anything other than rich, anything other than wealthy. And when you grow up in that kind of space, there is a need and want that persists around you to find a way out, to find something better. And I would like to present this argument that yes, it could easily be said these things start at school. I mean, I'm sorry, in the family, in the household, because I remember as a child, even into my young adulthood, my parents saying get a good job and do the right things and make good money, and that was all to be able to have a more comfortable life. But definitely the ideal was to reach a space of wealth. But what's interesting is what happens in school. They don't show Simon's schooling or any reference to his school years, and I'll be interested to find out what that was like for him. But they do show Anna's. I think there's some things that I'm seeing in that space that makes me really think about my experiences as a child. It makes me think about your experiences as a child, especially going to school, and the things that you were told about success, about wealth. That could be very damaging. So, let's start with this. There's this prevailing message that when you go to school, you get an education, is because you have the opportunity to have a successful life. My question has always been, what is a successful life? Is it having things? Is it having money? Is it being able to live in a particular zip code or nation or community? And how is that being the main reasoning for getting education? How does that play with the psyche of a child? Because we don't learn just for the sake of learning. We don't learn to develop our imaginations and make an impact in the world or even in our house or in our community. We don't learn for the sake of just being a citizen. There is always this background thing about you're learning for the purpose of being greater. Even though we may not know it as a child, but eventually we understand that level of greatness that the education that we're receiving is supposed to grant us is so far from reality, because you could only have but so many Elon Musks, but so many Bill Gates, so many Warren Buffetts, so many Oprah Winfrey's, so many Waltons, so many Gucci's. We could only have but so many of these people, LeBron Jameses. But you're told as a child that if you work hard enough in school, you might one day, you could you could one day be that if you just work hard enough. And when you put that into a child's mind, guess what happens? They explore. I explored. I remember, being in pardon me, I had to take a sip of water there. I remember being in middle school here in America and then going to high school. And again, it was pumped in my brain. The purpose of your education is the opportunity to one day be free and have a great job and have a great life. Discounting whether my life in the present was great, it was almost like the future. So when you hear these things and then the examples of greatness and wealth and this freedom is given to you based on the lifestyles of the rich and famous, then you start to explore it. And you start to discount what you have. Because all of a sudden what you have is not good enough, because what you have is not on the same level of what you see on TV, what you read in the magazines. I think it's very poignant that scene where Anna Delvey, or as a child, Sorokin, is cutting images out of magazines and putting her face on top of the different models and the outfits. Because again, that's what we expose our children to. And I can tell you this, I see it right now. I see children in the schools I've worked at for the past 16 years who have said to themselves that their goal in life is to attain something that someone has, and typically this person is a celebrity. This person or or these persons have peripherals to celebrities, or if they're not peripherals to celebrities, they're professions that potentially can yield a fortune. So being a doctor, because doctors make good money, being a corporate attorney, because corporate attorneys make good money, being an engineer, because the person who designed and built that amazing building, the Wiz Khalifa, or whatever it may be, makes really great money, and that becomes the push. And I believe this: when that happens, what we end up seeing is a space in which children start to define themselves entirely based on their proximity to these great people, or these of that greatness. So it becomes about getting that A on that exam so that I can go to the right college or wherever it may be, and hopefully, sometimes blindly believe that I'm going to reach that space, even though we know that not everybody can. It's only a small percentage that do. And those who are not able to attain those things find themselves in a very precarious space. If I'm not good enough in school and I can't get the right grades, then what are my other options? Especially for those who buy into success as portrayed in media, hook, line, sinker, and they're like, this is what I want to do. They find themselves in that position where they now start to make decisions that might not be the best decisions. But if you have no other option, if school and the traditional route I'm going to put that in air quotes, the traditional route, because I don't even know what that traditional route is. But if that path to success and that happy life and those things, just material things, if the path is not a straight one for me, then I have to. And if the path is not straight for me, and I am ambitious enough, I have to create another path to get there. And that's why I've seen friends of mine in spaces I've worked at, in the communities I've lived in, where people now choose to go a route that is not as savory. No, not even I can't even say not savory, just illegal. Making choices to get those things. And maybe that's what happened with Simon Levy. So Lviv, he was in a space where his imaginations and the potentials and the possibilities, the magazines on TV, walking through Tel Aviv and seeing these mansions and skyscrapers, whatever the case may be, and saying, I will never reach that space because maybe I didn't do as well in school. And again, I have no evidence of what his schooling was, but I can tell you this though. In the documentary, they did share images of a check he wrote, which at first I thought was maybe not the real check, and maybe it wasn't the real check. But it did. But one of the women showed a letter and showed his writing, and I was looking at it, and I thought to myself, either whoever's writing this has really, really, really bad penmanship, a certain level of dysgraphia, but it showed someone, from my perspective, who hasn't had a lot of time in spaces to formally write, and maybe he wasn't taught to write in English. Maybe that's why it looked like that. But it definitely made me wonder what was level of education. And then even I've met Israelis who are very well educated, and the words he used, the way he spoke, made me wonder, like, for someone who's the son of a billionaire that he claimed to be, and who would have been attended some of the best schools in the world as the heir of this empire, it just didn't mesh. So I'm going to make the assumption that maybe he wasn't a great student. Maybe there were some things hindering him from being successful in school, and taking the long but but legal path towards maybe accomplishing his dreams. And this is all he had. Some of you might be thinking to yourself, well, why are you blaming the schools? It still sounds like he made a choice. But there's a thing that we do in schools where we do not really cater to the unique gifts of our students. We don't help children really truly explore their passions and their abilities. Again, some people might say, but that's not what school is for. We're not here to explore passions. We're here to get through the content, make sure you have the foundational skills that you need to move on to the next grade and go to high school and graduate and go to college and be successful in college. And in college, you can explore your those things that you're interested in, those things that may be passions or talents. Okay. But in researching a lot of the top private schools in America, schools that cost anywhere from $40,000 to $80,000 a year. I'm not talking about colleges. I'm talking about private secondary schools. There is so much emphasis on building on talent. So much emphasis on creating spaces that maximizes the unique abilities of the individual and give them the skills to harness those unique abilities. That's not what happens in the typical public school. And I'll be honest with you, I'm ashamed to say this as a principal. I know my career for the past 16 years as an educator, I can say for a fact that I've worked in schools where that was not the case at all. And I know many schools across the country. And I've worked in 3 states. I've worked in schools in 3 states: New York, in Los Angeles, and in Nevada. And the majority of schools, that's not the case. There's just very clear focus on making sure that we meet the instructional objectives, the standards, and the testing goals of the city and state. And then what happens is those kids who perform the highest are pushed with these ideas that you can make it and you can be this great thing. And again, please understand this. I'm not here being a naysayer saying that a child cannot, because I do not believe that. Again, I was, for those of you who don't know, in the 3rd grade, I was tested and thrown into special education. My mom had no choice in the matter. She had very little understanding at the time what the whole special ed thing meant, and that space was a space that almost, it almost destroyed me. It almost destroyed me. And if it wasn't for the fact I had a mother who refused to let her son, be thrown in the basement of our school building, and be forgotten down there, and did one of the hardest things, taking me back to Nigeria to finish my elementary school education there, I don't know where I would be right now. But she did that for me, and I came here and I went through, the last months of my middle school years all the way through high school here, and I attended the University of Rochester, and I have 2 master's degrees, one from Columbia University, and so I can say that that I had a relatively successful education, and I was able to reach a space that transcended, where I grew up in the spaces I was around in Los Angeles, in Watts, and then in South Central, and then in Inglewood, California. All these spaces that where in school I was being told you can elevate from here, and I guess I did elevate from there. But I'm saying now, as one of those kids looking back, that that's not what I really needed, because I had unique skills and dreams and abilities, and no one ever asked me about them. I wonder if any teacher ever asked Anna Sorokin, like, hey, What is it? What moves you? What is it you want out of life? I wonder if anyone said the same thing to Simon. And I wonder if their education was based on building them and their passions and their skills, if they would have ended up where they are right now. Some of you might be thinking to yourself, but bro, you're tripping. These people have actually, they're actually very well off, and even though they did prison time, I mean, Anna Sorokin did 3 years, I think 3 years in prison, and I know that Simon Leviev he got 15 months, but only did 5 in Israel, in prison in Israel, and they're both, living their best lives, because as a result of what they did and the acclaim and the social media buzz and the films and everything else. I mean, Anna was paid $320,000 by Netflix for the rights to adapt her story into the film Inventing Anna. And I can only imagine that even though that money helped to pay off some of her restitution and some of the stuff that she did and her lawyer fees and all that, but I'm pretty sure that that she's going to be a compelling figure for a while, and will definitely be able to turn her experiences into and make it profitable. And Simon himself as well, same thing. But after he got out of jail, you can see videos of him, still popping bottles and driving, Lambos and all that. Because again, we live in a world where, you can monetize your crimes and the things that you've done. And that's not what the purpose of this podcast is. I want to use this as a platform to ask ourselves, what is it that we are doing in our schools to really help our children harness their gifts? Anna could have been the next great artist or art curator or fashion designer, whatever the case may be, if someone had looked into her skill sets. And it's funny, again, this is all from the film, her having I think it's called eidetic memory. So she had a photographic memory, her abilities. I mean, she clearly was skilled and had abilities to really network and build capacity, and somewhat of a visionary, in some cases. But I wonder what would have happened if that was built upon, if she was allowed to redevelop that in school and see how far she could have gone with that, versus, catfishing a whole entire community, and being somebody that she wasn't or that she isn't. And same thing with Simon Leviev. Like, what would have happened? Because again, some of the stuff he did the things he did was despicable. But however, he got away with it, at least for a while. The mind is able to create some space like that. I wonder what would have happened if he was given the proper guidance to really, really be able to hone in his talents and gifts. But again, if those gifts and talents and abilities are not really, truly, built upon, then guess what happens? I love there's this old school quote, idle hands are the devil's playground. We all have hands, and if our hands are our gifts and our talents, and if they're left idle, then guess what it becomes? It becomes a very misguided playground, and you start to use those gifts and talents to do things that you probably shouldn't be doing. Again, some of you are probably thinking, you know what, you're saying all this, but look at the benefits that they, were able to kind of harness from these experiences. But the reality is, look at the harm that they did. Look at the people that were hurt in those spaces. And not everyone who does these things is fortunate. I have family members who have leaned towards making decisions that are criminal, and they paid for it dearly. With one family member over a decade in prison, in federal prison, because they had to reach for that forbidden fruit of wealth, and they couldn't get it one way, so they tried to get another way. And I have another family member who did the same thing, and not immediate family, because I don't want my siblings to be like, yo, you talking. No one in my immediate family, but definitely my extended family members, who went through who had to do time. And I always wonder, like, what happens to our children in our schools, especially those of us who are educators. We see some of our kids who are incredibly talented, and we hope the best for them. But then we also see other kids that are incredibly talented, but the hope in their eyes it's just not there. And you wonder whether or not they're going to be able to maneuver into the future outside of school and figure a life for themselves that is worth their dreams, that's in alignment with their dreams for themselves, versus, moving in the path of crime, are doing things to attain the wealth and the status that you were told or promised that you could reach with a great education. So, again, it's very important that, listen, I have two children. I have a son who's going to be 3, in very, very, in about a week and a half or so. He's about to be 3 years old. I have a daughter who will be 4, later on this year. And in my mind, I am constantly in the space of really thinking, along with my wife, thinking about their future, their education, and even the way we talk to them and what we plant in them right now. Because my son can easily be Simon, Lviv. My daughter could easily be Anna Delvey. We're all one decision, one idea, one disappointment from creating a reality for ourselves that can send everything crashing, that could put us in that wrong path. And not everyone recovers like these two people did. So in my mind, I'm asking myself, what is it that I want for my children's education? But if I'm going to ask that about my children, the children that came from my wife and I, but I also have to ask the same question about the children that I'm tasked with, protecting in my school as a principal, in my classrooms, because again, the system we're working on forces us to tell stories that often, very, very gray in nature, so that we have children rethinking that if they do A, B, C, they'll get all the things that they want, versus really creating a space to allow kids to really explore their talents and gifts and really help them hone in on those things that they're great at, so that there's a potential that they'll reach something that they didn't have before. So yeah, I hope that those of you who are listening, that this was somewhat helpful. This is me here talking and just kind of like unpacking ideas in my head, and it's very curious. I mean, this space is very interesting. Like watching these documentaries and these films are, gets my brain ticking, and I hope that it does the same thing for you. So well, with that, I'm going to come to the closing of this episode of the Sneaker Principle podcast, and I hope that again that you would subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Share, like, do all the above. I really want to grow this channel. I stepped away for a while, and now I'm like, okay, no, I got to go full breath into this. So I'm asking those of you who are watching, regardless of what platform you are, visit my YouTube channel, go on there, subscribe, join, like, and the other thing too, give me comments. Let me know what you think about what I said this evening. Share your thoughts, because I actually do take them into consideration, and I do make a lot of adjustments. I actually even create content based on ideas of what I see on comments and questions I'm asked. So but with that being said, guys, thank you so much for being here this evening. I want to wrap it up so I can get some shut-eye and get to the gym in the morning. I hope to see you guys really soon, hopefully sooner than you expect. So with that being said, thank you so much. Be well, be safe, and I will talk to you guys soon, all right? And how do I get out of here? Here we go.
And now he's been promoted. His job, principal.